I literally felt like the entirety of this book, I was either going to scream or cry. Hey y'all, it's Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, we are going to be doing an author taste test of Kylie Lee Baker. Alright, so before I get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what are your thoughts on this author. Do you like her? Do you hate her? Let's talk about it. So if you are new here, I have a series on my channel where I do a taste test of an author. Usually I give authors 2 chances. If I love both of those books, they might be a new favorite. If I don't like both of those books, so sorry, I won't be reading from you again. For an author to qualify for one of these, I have to have more than 2 books of theirs on my TBR, and so one of those is Kylie Lee Baker. Now, I have had a few fantasy books from this author on my TBR for a very long time, but recently this author came out with a horror book, and that one really got my attention. So we are going to be reading for this video Bat Eater by Kylie Lee Baker, which is set during COVID, where we're following a young woman named Cora. She has become a crime scene cleanup expert, but notices a pattern of multiple Asian women passing and then mutilated bat bodies being found along with them. Cora starts to believe something is targeting Asian women in this area, but also that something might be coming for her as well. And once I found out Evernight was doing a special edition of it, I was even more excited. I love this version. It is so freaking terrifying and pretty. But on the opposite side, I decided to go with the first book by this author, her debut, The Keeper of Night, which is the first in a duology following a young woman named Ren, who is apparently half Reaper and half Shinigami. She has lived a majority of her life in London working with the Reapers and collecting souls, but is not really accepted by a majority of the community there. However, when her Shinigami powers start to really manifest and she loses control of them, she is forced to go on the run along with her brother and decides to travel to Japan in the hopes that maybe she will be accepted by her Shinigami brethren. And unfortunately, once she arrives there, she realizes it is not quite that simple either. I heard great things about this one from a lot of people who had read it, so I was also very excited going into it. Plus, like I said, I do have another fantasy book by this author on my TBR, so if I love this one, here's hoping I might love that one as well. And without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this video. Hey y'all, so I've hit the halfway point into Bat Eater, and I'm really liking this. Baker's writing style across the board is infectious. It is amazing. Like, this is so anxiety inducing. It really does get under your skin. It continuously keeps pulling me to the edge of my seat. It's got some grief horror elements. It has some character exploration around Cora. It's got really well written gore. As I said, there's some character exploration going on around Cora because she reads as a germaphobe, but it could also kind of tie in with some OCD possibly. And because of that, it's kind of clear that she has this like internalized ableism around it, and very much thinks that if anybody finds out this is how she acts, they're just gonna like put her into an insane asylum. But at the same time, because of her upbringing and unfortunately the really bad relationships she has had with all the adults in her life as she was growing up, it's kind of reinforce this mentality that she will be abandoned because she's just too inconvenient. The only real relationship that, even though it drove her crazy but also brought her joy, was with her sister. And now at the start of the book, her sister isn't there for her anymore, unfortunately. It's taken from her in a very traumatic way. And we see that like Cora is not only still dealing with the grief of what happened to her sister, how she hasn't really been able to handle it in the healthiest way. And now that she works as a crime scene cleaner where she's constantly just surrounded by all of this gory stuff day in, day out, it's really difficult for her to forget and move on from what happened to her sister. But along with that, because of her germophobia and being possibly OCD, she's also still horrified of COVID. Like, it seems as though the rest of the world has very much moved on by this point, but she has not. Yet, she being an Asian woman, unfortunately, she is still feeling the repercussions of the racism that Asian people experienced in the midst of COVID when it was really at its height. And God, I mean, some of the situations we watch her live through, or Baker writes them in this way that is so scary. Even if it's not truly violent with like a weapon, it's still just terrifying. I'm really, really liking this. It also has a little bit of religious discussions going on in this because Cora is mixed. Part of her family is Catholic, but the other half practices, it's not explicitly stated what religion it could be, but it's a lot more tied into her Chinese culture. And with that, we also see the role that ghosts have in Chinese culture, which has been really interesting. Cora is also kind of having to finally open herself up to it because she has never really been a very religious person in any way, shape, or form. And I've really liked seeing how her experiences with each of these different religions have impacted her and altered her own beliefs or her non-beliefs, I guess. And another thing I am loving about it is it does have this very, is it paranormal, is it not? Because Cora is sort of an unreliable narrator, like most of the time I would say she is a reliable narrator, but every once in a while something will be brought up that she doesn't believe. Like she thinks she's crazy for thinking this. You know, we as the readers are kind of being led to think that way as well, and we can't tell if what's paranormal is actually happening or if it's just all in her head. And I do really like that too. I think Baker is also utilizing that very well. This is just going so freaking good. At the halfway point now, I'm not 100% sure on what the plot is going to be doing next, because I thought going into this, like perhaps she was going to be the one investigating these crimes. Now that she's picked up on this MO that a perpetrator is utilizing while she's cleaning up all these different crime scenes, I don't know if it's quite going to be that. It also kind of has this like ghost hunting angle, and now that she's making some connections with the people at her job and making friends with them, it seems like she's not going to be alone, and I'm so excited to see how that's going to impact her character. I am really enjoying seeing her relationship with her friends growing, how she's finally making some connections with people, because she's so isolated, and even the people she does connect with, she either feels like are doing it out of obligation or she feels like she's doing it out of obligation, namely with her aunts, but also finally using somebody for a sounding board so she can work out what's going on in her head a little bit more. She can understand like what's actually normal, what's not. Like we're gonna finally get answers as to, is this all in her head or is this actually happening? I am so intrigued, guys. This is so freaking good. Hey guys, so I officially finished out Bat Eater and I loved this. This is literally a combination of like everything I enjoy in horror books put together. If Kylie Lee Baker comes out with anything else horror, I will be picking it up immediately because I had such a good time with this. It was so good. Around the halfway point, I wasn't quite sure where we were going to be going when it came to the plot, but I actually love how this ended up rounding out. It sort of is like a mystery of Cora figuring out what's going on, but it's also got the paranormal element where it's not so much that she's like trying to figure out who this serial perpetrator is. It's her doing her best to try and bring peace to herself and to her sister and to these ghosts that she unfortunately keeps seeing. I grew to care about Cora so freaking much throughout this story. I mean, like pretty immediately I was invested in her life and I just wanted to wrap her up in a hug and like take care of her, especially the more we learn about her background and all of the other people in her life that, you know, are like kind of there for her, but are they really? I was really impressed though with how we get to see Cora grow throughout this book, because there was a time or two where it felt like what Cora was doing did make sense for the character, but I didn't love it as far as, you know, how the plot was unfolding. But that got so much better as the book continued on. And like I said, we watch Cora experience all of these really terrifying things, and we see how these start to affect her to the point where she's like, I'm not taking it anymore. I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to fix this, whatever it is. And just, I loved that. I loved that so much. The anxiety in the writing is infectious, and that continues the entire time. Even if it's something as small as Cora maybe seeing a ghost around her, you're still uncomfortable. But then like as the story continues and crazier, darker, scarier things start to happen, it's just so all-consuming. I literally felt like the entirety of this book, I was either going to scream or cry. I was on the verge of one of those because of the feeling that Baker was instilling in me through her writing. And again, like I said, there were times I wasn't quite sure where we were going to be going next, but I trusted Baker, and I was so right to do that because she pulled out this twist at the end that is one of my favorites. I think it is such a crazy one, but it has to be set up right. It has to be utilized in a clever way. And like, I just don't think everybody can really make it work. It's one of those where it doesn't make sense in a large majority of horrors or thrillers. But in this one, really, really liked it. Really liked how she pulled it out. I loved this. How everything resolved here was so freaking good. This was five freaking stars. Like, this is a big old 5 stars. I really want Kylie Lee Baker to come out with another horror book because this was so good. But I am definitely excited to try out some of her fantasy stuff. This was so good, y'all. Hey y'all, so I've officially started into Keeper of Night, and it has not gone well. We'll just start there. I made it 138 pages into this, and unfortunately, I think I have come to the decision that I'm gonna DNF this one, which is a real shock, I will say. I'll be upfront, part of this may just be wrong book, wrong time sort of thing. Like, maybe if I was reading this at a different point, it might have gone better. But for right now, yeah, no, I just don't care. I actually had a really hard time figuring out if I wanted to DNF this book or not, because I felt initially like I didn't have a real reason to put it down. I just wasn't gelling with it. And I realize obviously that is a reason, but it feels like you have a little bit more validity when you can like point to something as a problem for why you're putting the book down. And it took a lot of thinking for me to get there, but I think it comes down to 2 things. First off, I'm not really caring for the main character, Ren. I do think it's really cool that Baker is doing a very morally gray character. I mean, Ren literally, like, from the first interaction we see her have with somebody, she's not exactly a good person. She's kind of rough. She's pretty cold. It's clear she has lived a rather rough life up until this point, and obviously that has affected the woman she has become. But apart from those certain interactions where we would really see this morally gray element, I just wasn't really feeling a lot of personality from her, so it was kind of hard for me to get invested into her story. Like, I wasn't really rooting for her, I guess. The other half of why I was really struggling to get invested into the story is how the world building was being done. So the setup of this book is so cool. She has a character who is part Reaper and then part Shinigami, and so we learn that throughout the world there are these different death beings who take care of passing in their areas, in their cultures. But I had so many questions. And that's kind of funny because whenever the book starts, honestly, there's a ton of info dumping right at the beginning. You just learn so much about the Reapers out of nowhere. And by the point I reached where it almost seems as though the Reapers aren't really important anymore, I don't know if those answers are ever really gonna come. For example, we learn that Reapers are born the same way humans are. I mean, raise the kid to become a Reaper as well. Okay, so like, how did they start? Because we know there's the head Reaper, which I will be honest, I don't remember what his name was, but we know there's like the head death character. Why did he create these Reapers? Why does he have them? How did he create them also? Are they all family members? Like, are they all from the same tree? Which in that case, like, I have some follow-up questions. But what made these people so special to be Reapers? If they're not all related to each other, how big is their community? Also, what was with the relationship between Ren's bio parents? Because we learn, like, right out of the get-go, her father was shunned for having a child with a Shinigami, and he has essentially disowned her. So why did he have a child with a Shinigami? Why did he take the child with him? Why did the Reaper community allow him to raise her? Why is she allowed to be a Reaper? She also has a little brother, Nevin, who was probably my favorite character, honestly. And there's a mention that if a Reaper has a second child, they don't handle death as well. Like, they're much more meek and timid, and they actually are sad whenever they have to take something's soul, which we see Nevin do. And like, is that real? Or is that just Reaper gossip? A major element of the story that I did like was the fact that Ren is biracial, and we see how her being biracial affects her place in this society. I mean, she is treated quite poorly by other Reapers. Like I said, her father has essentially disowned her. Really, her little brother is the only person who is kind to her in the entirety of the Reaper group. So of course, there's lots of tie-ins there with racism, and we see her experience microaggressions and flat-out aggressions. But as we learn more about the world building and how different cultures have their different death deities and the people who practice for that deity, so is she the first one in existence that is a mix of two different deity cultures? Is she like just the first Reaper and Shinigami? I don't know, like death is the great equalizer. It is something that is coming for everybody regardless of your culture. So I don't know, in the back of my head I almost wonder, why would they care about race, except for when it comes to their fear around her powers, because she has the abilities of Reapers and the abilities of Shinigami, which like I got that, but then going back to one of my earlier questions, why was she allowed to be a Reaper in the first place then? Like I said, I had a lot of questions popping up and I really wasn't sure if these were actually going to be answered or if they were just going to end up being plot holes. Right around the time I ended up putting this down, I did realize that we were starting to see she is also unfortunately going to be experiencing prejudice on the opposite side now that they are in Japan, because she is still biracial and so they're still going to treat her poorly because she is half white. Appreciate how Baker was working that into the story and the like struggle of not being wholly one thing one way or another, having a hard time finding a place in both societies that, you know, technically she can claim but apparently don't want to claim her. And kind of going off of that, another major issue I was having with the book is the, I guess I'll say, timeline problem. So Rin, we're told, is like 200 years old, but she's essentially like 16. Something that kind of tied into the racism that she's experienced from the Reapers is the fact that they don't like change because, you know, they live for so long, they get used to their ways, so naturally it's hard for them to change. Yet it's mentioned there are Reapers who are like millennia old. In that case, wouldn't change be something they like have to live with on the daily, or like their daily, because they're still technically part of the human world, sorta. Therefore, wouldn't change be near constant? You would think, if anything, they would be more used to it. Again, it was an interesting element of the story, but I was having a hard time wrapping my mind around it in this fantastical world. Like I said, I was really enjoying ideas about this book, or like the initial setup, but once we started diving in deeper, I was kind of starting to have issues. The writing itself still did enjoy. I do feel like, having read Bat Eater first, I can see how Baker's writing has improved, but even here, I mean, like, you can feel the story is on the grim side. There's been a few little gorier moments that did come across in a very imaginative and well-written way. The atmosphere is definitely on the darker side given the topics that are going on. Writing alone in this sort of a fantasy book is not enough for me to push through all of my other issues. And then whenever we had a hot guy get introduced, my eyes like pretty immediately rolled, and I don't really care. I don't want to keep reading this, and I'm really bummed about that. This is very unexpected, honestly. I did not think the second book for this video would be a DNF. Did not see that coming. But again, I think how I ended up reading the books for this video probably is part of the problem, because I went from her newest book to her debut. Obviously, she's improved a bit from here because I loved her newest book, but also, I mean, that was a horror and this is a fantasy. Maybe I just don't really like how she does fantasy. I mean, maybe it's the fact that this is YA and I'm expecting the world building to answer some of these bigger questions that I had that younger readers might not care about, but like, I've started to gravitate more and more towards higher fantasy stories, so I am thinking about them and like, how are they affecting the world? And I don't know, whenever there's a question that pops up around logic in a book, I have such a hard time ignoring it. This was an unexpected close of this video. With that, do I think I would read another book from this author? I'm going to say yes. I think I would be hesitant to try out her other fantasy series that she has. Instead, I'm eyeing her next horror novel that she'll be having come out next year, which is called Japanese Gothic. And I gotta say, just from like the title and cover alone, I am intrigued. And obviously, I really liked her horrific writing. I liked how dark she could be. I liked her unsettling prose. Her world building, not for me. So this is a yes, but I guess it'll depend on the genre of the book. All right, so on that note, that is officially it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, let's leave. Is there a Tory gate emoji, like the Japanese gate, go ahead and leave me that in the comments down below. I have links to all of my socials as well as a few ways you can support me down in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!